Hey everybody, good afternoon. It's a Friday in June, but the atmosphere and the tropics look like a Friday in August, and that is never a good thing. But I know a lot of attention has been given to the state of the sea surface temperatures out there, which have been very, very warm, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we're going to talk about a tropical wave we're watching out there. If you find these videos helpful, beneficial, you learned something, maybe it will help somebody else, please, by all means, be sure to click the like button, subscribe, and get the notifications. I try to do these typically when there is an active system and advisories are being issued. I try to do that around 4:30 in the afternoon, sometimes if we need it, 10:30 in the morning, before the National Hurricane Center issues their advisories, so that basically we get them when the advisories come in. Now, one thing that I don't like doing is burying the lead, because a lot of folks are like, well, we're talking about the tropics and maybe you're not going to be impacted at all. You don't care. So let's get right to what I call the Tropical Threats Hurricane Preps graphic. And this is for the next 5 days. And really, there's only one area right now that kind of needs to perk up a bit in the next 5 days. And what this graphic really shows is, do I need to be thinking about hurricane preparations? This doesn't talk about strong winds. It doesn't talk about rain. It doesn't talk about all the, the tropical depression, the tropical storm, stuff like that. This is the I need to put up shutters kind of graphic. Or maybe I do. This is the I need to make extra preparations apart from basically just ordinary tropical activity. And so really the only area right now, and it's right on the edge of the 5-day kind of timeline here. So we're Friday, so 5 days is next Wednesday. It's right on the edge here, and right on the edge meaning that it probably wouldn't fall into the 5-day time frame, but because it's a Friday and we're going into the weekend, I just want these folks especially to kind of pay a little closer attention. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the northern Leeward Islands here, basically. This includes just east of the Virgin Islands. Folks in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico are obviously watching this, but this is mainly the northern part of the Lesser Antilles, what we think of typically as the northern Leeward Islands there. So you folks, I would just be watching this through the weekend a little more closely than everybody else. Everybody else in the blue area, don't watch it through this weekend. And one of the things I do want to talk about as we go into this hurricane season and through this hurricane season is kind of a concept I came up with last year, which is, what should I be doing right now? Everybody in the blue areas on that graphic, which included all of the U.S. coastline and much of the Caribbean, right now you should be doing your normal seasonal hurricane plans. That means checking your insurance, checking your house, making sure it's in good shape. Remember, part of our plans, which is our twofold, is one, getting through the hurricane, which means our home will survive, or if we're in an evacuation area, we will leave that evacuation area, just get outside of it. That's the storm surge threat. And then the second part of our hurricane plan is, what do we do after we have a direct hit? That is the flashlights, the generators, the food, things like that. So all of those things are things we kind of keep in mind in the back of our minds as we go through a hurricane event, and that's part of our hurricane plan. Our hurricane plan, once again, it's twofold, meaning getting through the storm and then dealing with after the storm. But right now, once again, what are we doing right now? 99.9% of us, normal hurricane plans, right? So insurance, maybe cleaning up any palm fronds that are getting overgrown, things like that. Checking the house, just making sure everything is working. Now, if this does become a situation that we're becoming a little more concerned about next week, right now I don't think it is that type of a case, then we'll talk about what we're doing at that time. That might be we're making more aggressive preps, things like that. Remember, and I repeat this frequently, and for those of you who watch a lot, you're like, Craig, you talk about this every time. I know, but there's always a lot of new folks coming on, and so I try to bring everybody along. So you pros out there, kind of just hang on. You've heard this 100 times, and thank you for watching 100 times. But hurricanes are a marathon, and hurricane season preps and getting through a threat is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's never something you want to do at the last minute. You want to just make little preps step by step by step. We can always stop our preps at any point during the timeline here, and if we need to, we can continue the preps right up until we get to a point where maybe we're dealing with a hurricane. But we never want to rush our preps. We also never want to be surprised. That's the other big thing I say. So we watch things like this. We don't want to, at the last moment, say, oh, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect it to come here. You weren't saying that 5 days ago. Nope. We stay in tune. We make little preps along the way, and we never want to be surprised. So with that in mind, and last year what I would do is always what I call my deeper dive, which is kind of like more of the things that are going on. And for those of you who are like, well, it's not coming this way, it's not going to bother me, at least in the next 5 days, you know what, you don't care about the meteorology, you don't need to continue to watch. But let's talk a little bit about the meteorology, because what kind of is unusual here, and this is the eastern Atlantic, and then this deeper part of the tropical Atlantic, we call that the main development region. It extends all the way into the Caribbean. It used to just cover the Atlantic. It's basically the deep tropics. And one of the reasons we care about this area, the MDR, as you might see on Twitter and things like that, or the main development region, is that this is where our major hurricanes typically come from. It extends basically from the Caribbean all the way through the deep tropics there. And you can see clearly here, and I apologize, I'm a little bit rusty. I haven't done a lot of these since last year. This is kind of our strong tropical wave here that's got a little bit of spin to it. I mean, there's definitely some stronger winds on the north side of it, and so we've got some action there, and there's some lighter or slight monsoonal southwesterly winds down there. So it's basically imparting a bit of twist to it there, a little bit of shear, or what we commonly call vorticity there. There's a little bit closer look at it. Of course, the sun's already gone down out there, but you can make out a little bit of that kind of shearing effect to it, which are these stronger trade winds are blowing here, and the lighter winds are kind of coming up from the south. So there's this overall kind of twist being applied to the tropical wave. Now, here's the water vapor loop, and right away, this doesn't look like June. Typically in June, it's fairly dry out here. You remember if you watched last year, we talked a lot about how there was this flow like this across much of Africa, even in Europe, that just kept blowing dry air into the central and eastern deep tropics. That is not the case. There is not hardly any of that flow from the northeast there. So this dry air up here, it's really kind of just going to stay up here. And look at all of the moisture that is draped across the Atlantic. I mean, the intertropical convergence zone here is really kind of moist. And so one thing we don't need, which sometimes we do need, especially when the tropical waves become active, is a lead tropical wave to kind of be sacrificial. Go out there, go across the tropics there and moisten the atmosphere. It's already plenty moist down there, and there are no indications that this dry air, at least in the present and in the models, is going to kind of impinge down into that area of very moist air down there. Also, and we'll talk about this a little bit more too, there's not a lot of wind shear down here. Wind shear is evidenced by a little bit faster cloud elements or motions here in the water vapor loop. There's some shear up there. There is a bit of shear here. And shear does two things. Shear typically causes it more difficulty for a tropical system to organize because the thunderstorms tend to get blown away from the center where it's trying to organize. And it also has the possibility of inducing or introducing dry air into the circulation, and dry air is disruptive to tropical systems. It creates downdrafts, and downdrafts are disruptive features. So all things and remember, as we go through this is all, we're doing our analysis here. We're kind of like putting all these little puzzle pieces together and learning as we go, and then hopefully we have some idea of what's going to go on. Now, the National Hurricane Center, at least when I last checked, had not started this is an invest yet. I think it's going to be invest 92. And once it becomes an invest, what that means is that they kind of open a window over it. So we get more higher resolution data. The models then start doing what we call using model trackers. And model trackers are these programs that try to find the center of whatever it is we're looking at and then track it over time. And that's where we get what we call I hate the term, the spaghetti models, which are all those little lines that come out. So once they start this invest on it, then we'll start getting all those trackers and the spaghetti models and a bunch more information on it. And I think, they should probably, it's obviously their discretion, but they'll probably be starting it fairly soon here because they'd like to see that more kind of higher resolution type of data. So since we don't have the models right now in that form, we have just kind of what the model itself is outputting. This is the European model. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just basically kind of cheat a little bit and say, well, if there was a model tracker here, where would it focus? We would probably start it there on this area of twist. This is also known as low-level vorticity. There's a few little other areas here. Those are some areas where the winds are kind of coming together, maybe out of the northeast and the southwest. So it's creating this overall shear zone there. That being said, we can advance this through time and watch how the European model here, the operational run, kind of handles it. So we're going to go through the next 5 days, and you can see there's some consolidation there. And here we come towards Tuesday, and then there we are Wednesday. And clearly we've got the model's representation of consolidation. The model's representation of consolidation there, of a more circular feature. Is it a tropical depression? Is it a tropical storm? Well, remember, one of the definitions of a tropical cyclone is persistent convection, typically thunderstorms we think of, and also kind of a focused feature here. Now, a center of rotation, a trackable center. If the winds are over 40 miles an hour and above, then we have a tropical storm. If they're less than that, then we have a tropical depression. But at least according to this model here, the European, there's some indication that on this run, this model is hinting towards a tropical depression, maybe even a tropical storm 5 days away. And clearly you can see why folks in the Lesser Antilles here, especially in the northern islands there, need to watch, because a lot of the models then trend kind of this kind of turning motion here. Now some of the suggestions are a faster, weaker system would go more to the west, a stronger would go to the more the northeast. These are all possibilities, and what I appreciate is when people say, Craig, we like watching you because you don't hype it, you don't get overly excited, you just kind of lay it out there. And I mean, what's the point of hyping it? It could be bad enough on its own. I don't need to hype it. And right now it doesn't look like it's going to be something bad, but we don't want surprises. So, we plan obviously for all kinds of scenarios. So this is the Wednesday afternoon time frame. Of course, we'll keep watching it. That's the European model. And once the model trackers come out, we'll pay more attention to it. So here is the dust. A lot of folks saying, well, where's the dust? Is the dust out there? The dust is out there. The dust has been running below normal this year. Last year was near average. The thing about last year was there was a lot of dry air. The dust is associated with dry air. Sometimes the dry air can be on its own. The dust can kind of be out there, but usually when there's dust, there's dry air. The dust does several things, the Saharan dust. Number one, it usually is associated with stronger wind shear. Number two, it's usually dry air. Number three, because of the particles in the Saharan dust, they absorb sunlight, shortwave radiation, and they literally warm the atmosphere above the ground, which creates what we think of as in terms of an inversion. Inversions are atmospheric conditions or profiles that warm as you go up. They don't cool like we normally would expect. And the big thing about inversions is they resist vertical development or thunderstorm activity. So the dust kind of does a lot of things to disrupt or suppress tropical activity, but right now the dust is running below normal. Now I'm going to go through this for the next 5 days, and what you'll see here as we go forward here are features down in here. As it goes over time, you'll see it kind of moves along and it wraps dust around it. And once again, if shear's low, it doesn't necessarily mean that the dust is going to go into it. The dust could be disruptive, but right now it doesn't look like the dust is going to dominate the development of this system. In other words, the dust is probably not going to be a big restricting type of feature as we go forward. So here we go forward into time, and you'll see here comes the little swirl right there on the bottom edge of the dust. And you can see the dust kind of getting wrapped around it. But as we go through time there, the dust looks like it's outside of it. You know, and that happens. Sometimes what will happen is the system moistens up. If there's not a lot of shear, then you won't have a lot of dry air getting into it. That's the dust. The other thing, of course, that would be disruptive or a factor is wind shear. And this, unfortunately, this really, until we get the trackers going and stuff like that, this isn't the best representation. But there's some shear up here. Our features down here. There's some shear over here in the eastern and central Caribbean. There's some shear up here off the southeast U.S. coast. So all these things are things we watch, and we'll go forward into time here. And like I said, there's no model tracker on there, so we really can't see exactly where that feature is over time. But it basically is kind of right out in here, in this area here. So there's shear to the north, and there's some shear to the south, but maybe there's this opportunity for it to go west over time. Now, the indication is, and I kind of peeked ahead and looked at the models beyond 5 days, the indication is that there's going to be some shear here. So, and there's also going to be some tendency to steer the system from west to east as we get into here. And that indication is that a stronger system out here would tend to sense that and want to go to the north. Weaker would more likely go to the west. It's early to really nail down on that. All of these things are things that we watch as we go forward into time. I don't really want to just, we're already 15 minutes in. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. So I don't want to beat this to death. This is something that we watch. And as I said, it's something at this part of the season that we pay attention to. We don't want to be surprised. We don't let our eyes off of it. Hurricanes events are marathons. Hurricane preparations marathon. And we just do little by little by little by little. I think unless something big happens over the weekend, which I don't think is going to happen, I'm probably not going to do another one until maybe Sunday. We'll do Sunday around, say, 5 o'clock, 4:30 to 5 o'clock. So once again, if you get the notifications, hopefully you'll get an alert. I usually try to post it on Twitter, the link, because YouTube has become incredibly difficult to find, like when there's a live. Like if you put live in your stream and then you click on live streams, live pops up even though it might have been 2 weeks old. So hopefully that will a little bit of help there. Of course, we're all very calm, no hype. We're not scared. We're not worried. We're not anxious. It is what it is. We live in a culture, Florida, at least along the coast, our culture should be, we deal with hurricanes. We have hurricanes, and we get through them, and we get through them in the best way that we can. So with that in mind, I'm wishing everybody a good weekend. Unfortunately, it's very hot. Do your best to avoid the heat, and I will talk to you on Sunday afternoon. Thanks for watching, and until then,